Alrighty, this is We the People News. One more time at it. Educational purpose only. Just opinions if I say anything. Do not take it any other way as such. Alright, let's make this quick and simple. Time's running out. Go, go, go.
Second provision prohibits this kind of implied expansion of federal power. Now, North Carolina took a very similar approach. Here's their first recommended amendment to the Constitution. One, again, this is going to sound familiar. Again, they're always connected, this 10th Amendment, 9th Amendment thing, or vice versa. First, that each state in the Union shall, respectively, retain every power, jurisdiction, and right which is not by this Constitution delegated to the Congress of the United States or to the departments of the federal government. And then in recommended amendment number 18 in North Carolina, this was one to prevent that kind of expansive construction of federal power that would lead to power always growing. That those clauses which declare that Congress shall not exercise certain powers, I keep going back to, shall not be infringed, for example, because it's so straightforward, be not interpreted in any manner whatsoever to extend the powers of Congress, but that they may be construed either as making exceptions to the specified powers where this shall be the case, or otherwise as inserted merely for greater caution. And Kurt Lash summed it up like this. North Carolina's proposals are even more specific than New York's declarations in their focus on the implied expansion of federal power. In addition to preserving the principle of enumerated power, the enumeration of rights must not suggest any extension of enumerated powers. This goes beyond preserving the principle of enumerated power and prevents the implied extension of those powers which are enumerated. And Virginia's ratification in the summer of 1788, they followed this same kind of approach. First of all, by confirming that there must be a declaration or a Bill of Rights, and that the people have a vast reservoir of natural rights. They wrote that there be a declaration or Bill of Rights asserting and securing from encroachment the essential and unalienable rights of the people in some such manner as the following. So it's a recommendation. First, that there are certain natural rights of which men, when they form a social compact, cannot deprive or divest their posterity. Among which, of course, this is not an exhaustive list, are the enjoyment of life and liberty, with the means of acquiring, possessing, and protecting property, and pursuing and obtaining happiness and safety. And that list.
Sit and think about that part right there, right? Officer safety, officer safety. Alright, well, right here it's saying people's safety, or property safety, right? Protecting property. Okay? If you're behind on property tax, is that protecting property or is that theft? And the founding fathers never said it is okay to tax your private property. In fact, the only tax is supposed to be on is in form of commerce, not to catch all. Everything you say or do, all these taxes is a catch-all, and it's not supposed to exist.
Of natural rights, of course, it's not comprehensive. It's only among them. So their 17th recommended amendment was a provision to prevent the constructive extension of those delegated powers or the specific exclusions of delegated powers. And they put it like this, that those clauses which declare that Congress shall not exercise certain powers being not interpreted in any manner whatsoever to extend the powers of Congress. And as Kurt Lash pointed out, he, in one of his long research papers that we'll be publishing over in the blog.
So, what everybody's saying, right? Back in the day, okay, this legalese speaking is really unconstitutional. It's supposed to be clean. understandable by anybody that reads it. All right? Not to be misinterpreted. We don't need a judge to interpret a particular statute. Why? Because it's supposed to be clear and easy for the average people to read, not just attorneys or judges.
For this episode, we see the same kind of themes over and over in state ratification document after state after state. And he put it like this: all of these declarations and proposals share a common dual approach to controlling federal power. First, a declaration must be added that expressly declares the federal government has limited enumerated powers. All powers, jurisdiction, and rights not delegated to the federal government were to be retained by the states. But second, the enumeration of certain rights was not to be construed in any manner that expanded the scope of enumerated federal power. Both the declarations and rules of construction focused on controlling the expansion of federal power and reserving all non-delegated powers and rights to the states. And of course, when we're talking...
All right, so even with the word state, okay, lowercase. When they talk about the lowercase state, that is the people. The people, all right? But when they put it all in caps, they're talking about the administrative, commerce, business state. That's the reason why you see the state of, but it's in caps. That's because that's the corporation. All right? The lower states is the people.
Talking about states in their sovereign capacity here, we're really referring to them not necessarily as state governments, but the people of the several states, and they can determine what they want to delegate or reserve in regards to their own state government. Now, as Brian McClanahan points out, when James Madison drafted the amendments that eventually became the Bill of Rights, he referred to and relied very heavily on these proposals from the state ratifying conventions. And he put it like this: as proposals for a Bill of Rights flooded into James Madison's hands in the months after the Constitution was ratified, he quickly realized that individuals needed assurances that their liberties would not be circumscribed by the Constitution, nor would they be left to flutter in the wind should some ambitious men usurp power from the states or the people. In the first Congress, James Madison got to work on this pretty quickly, and he made an effort to give them exactly what they asked for on both counts. But first, he acknowledged the Federalist warning about even including a Bill of Rights in his June 8, 1789 speech on the House floor introducing amendments. He said, "It has been objected also against a Bill of Rights that by enumerating particular exceptions to the grant of power, it would disparage those rights which were not placed in that enumeration. And it might follow by implication that those rights which were not singled out were intended to be assigned into the hands of the general government and were consequently insecure." Very similar to the arguments we heard earlier in the show from people like James Iredell and Alexander Hamilton, but this was repeated over and over and over. And Madison made it clear, this is a pretty solid argument, but I think I've got a fix. Here's how he put it: "This is one of the most plausible arguments I've ever heard urged against the admission of a Bill of Rights into the system. But I conceive that may be guarded against." So check it out. Here's what he said: "I have attempted it, as gentlemen may see, by turning to the last clause of the fourth resolution." This was Madison's draft amendment that was a precursor to the Ninth Amendment. And he dealt with this by basically following the example of the ratifying conventions in North Carolina, Virginia, and elsewhere by creating a rule of construction. A rule of construction is how you read a legal document. The Ninth and Tenth Amendments are both rules of construction. And so the goal on this was to prevent a constructive expansion of federal power at the expense of individual liberty, of your rights. And Madison's proposal went like this: the exceptions here or elsewhere in the Constitution made in favor of particular rights shall not be so construed as to diminish the just importance of other rights retained by the people. But he added the additional caveat, or as to enlarge the powers delegated by the Constitution, but either as actual limitations of such powers or as inserted merely for greater caution. Again, this was following the proposals in the state ratifying conventions. Now, as it went through the process through the select committee in the House, they removed that second part. And as Madison explained it later in a letter to George Washington, this is because they thought it was redundant. If you say that you can't do these things, you're also saying you can't expand your power to do other stuff. I mean, this is really how it all ties together between the 9th and 10th Amendment working in tandem. And Madison explained it like this: if a line can be drawn between the powers granted and the rights retained, it would seem to be the same thing, whether the latter be secured by declaring that they shall not be abridged, or that the former shall not be extended. If no line can be drawn, a declaration in either form would amount to nothing. Now, ultimately, they settled on this text, which is part of the Constitution as of December 1791. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. Problem solved, right? Nope, not even close. Now, you might think that this was just a minor technical change of some legal language, or that James Madison's explanation that obviously had to be done was absolutely correct. But instead, it was a moment of high-stakes drama in Virginia that almost killed the entire Bill of Rights. I'll tell that story in just a moment, but I first wanted to mention that while I realize I'm going through a lot of detailed and important historical information here pretty quickly, it's my hope that
All right. So we're going to go ahead and end it here. So we can do a start again. Time is running out on my little clock. All right. This will be the People News. Till next time. Bye, y'all.